Two of the largest economies in Europe. More similarities than you could count. But one key difference: membership in the European Union, the largest coalition in Europe. We're talking about the United Kingdom and France, of course. Today, we're taking a look at how the two nations have been coping with similar challenges in different ways: unemployment, immigration, and political instability. Three plights of the French and the British. But how are they dealing with them? Who's curbed the issue, and who's sinking deeper and deeper? How has Brexit impacted the UK's economy? How has France's membership affected it? Simply, who got it worse? Let's take a look. At a glance, citizens living in the United Kingdom and France are both struggling. We'll start with how the people in the UK have been faring. As always, most commentaries on how the people in the UK have been doing begins with the country's decision to leave the EU. While understanding trade numbers might require expert analysis by a panel of economists, understanding the labor market doesn't entirely. Leaving the EU meant that the UK decided to withdraw its right to free movement. At the time, the idea was posed as restricting the influx of migrants from Eastern Europe into the UK. To be fair, the UK did see a massive influx from countries such as Poland when the A10 joined the coalition in its largest enlargement yet in 2004. However, many believe that the decision lacked foresight. Citizens from the UK withdrew their right to free movement too. A study by the think tanks Centre for European Reform and UK in a Changing Europe suggests that there are 330,000 fewer workers in the UK as a result of Brexit. That may only be 1% of the total workforce, but sectors such as transport, hospitality, and retail have been particularly affected. According to the ONS, the number of people over 16 in employment from March to May 2024 was 33 million. The employment rate for those older and just below retirement was 77.4%. Good numbers? Think again. The employment levels have actually gone down since 2023 by over 312,000. Unemployment was at 4.4% in 2024, which puts roughly 1.53 million people aged over 16 in the UK without work. Those numbers have gone up. Another figure to look at would be economic inactivity. The rate would be 22.1%, an increase of around 390,000 from 2023. The only upside was that the nominal wage has gone up in 2024. Average wages increased in real terms in the 3 months to May 2024, with an annual change of 3% including bonuses and 3.2% excluding bonuses. Nominal wages continued to rise at a rate of 5.7% including bonuses and 5.7% excluding bonuses. Is that enough? In light of the UK's housing crisis and reports that suggest some 60% of households in the country have now dipped into their savings just to make ends meet, no, the wage increase is not enough. Brexit has already significantly contributed to Britain's high inflation by complicating the country's primary trading relationship and devaluing the pound, making imports more expensive. A recent London School of Economics study found that Brexit has been responsible for about a third of the UK's food price inflation since 2019, adding nearly £7 billion to Britain's grocery bills. France has its own problems to deal with. French unemployment for the first quarter of 2024 remains steady at 7.5%, according to INSEE. This figure is unchanged from the previous 2 quarters, but slightly higher than the expectation of 7.4%. The number of unemployed people increased by about 6,000 from the previous quarter, reaching 2.3 million. However, the unemployment rate for individuals aged 25 to 49 dropped to 6.8%, a decrease of 0.2%. These unemployment figures highlight the challenge Emmanuel Macron faces in demonstrating that his controversial labor market reforms are achieving their desired outcomes and will be a measure of his presidency's success. The reforms aim to achieve full employment by the end of Macron's second term in 2027. Currently, the labor reforms have made it easier for companies to negotiate salaries and wages directly with employees, bypassing trade unions and collective agreements that affect the entire industry. They've also made it easier and cheaper for companies to hire and fire workers, reducing the time for court proceedings related to litigation to 12 months. Macron believes that this is crucial to encourage more hiring. Under the new rules, employees who have worked for 2 years at a company and are unfairly dismissed are entitled to only 3 months' pay, down from the previous 6 months' pay. For employees with 30 years of service, the limit is now 20 months' pay. However, these measures have been criticized by many as being too harsh on workers while rewarding companies with leniency. Youth unemployment is particularly problematic, with nearly 1 in 4 under 25s jobless. Government finances are also under strain, with budget deficits and accumulated debt exceeding EU rules. Despite this, France's borrowing costs in financial markets are low, partly due to the European Central Bank's bond-buying program. Persistent, weak economic growth underlies these issues. Between 1995 and 2007, France's GDP per capita grew more slowly than any other OECD country except Italy. By the end of last year, economic activity had only risen 2.8% from its pre-crisis peak. High costs for hiring and firing workers, strict dismissal legislation, and high social security contributions create a dual labor market, where some workers enjoy job security and benefits, while others, particularly the young, face precarious employment. Some argue that France's large public sector, accounting for 57% of GDP last year, is a burden, creating high taxes that deter work, saving, and investment. Conversely, others, like economist Thomas Piketty, argue that insufficient demand for goods and services, exacerbated by austerity, hinders economic recovery. Change is coming in the United Kingdom, but are you willing to bet on it? Immigration has been a hotly debated topic all over Europe, but particularly in countries that see a large influx of immigrants, such as Great Britain and France. An important question that has been brought up since Brexit is, has immigration actually gone down? To give you some context, polls show that areas in the UK that have seen a mass influx of immigrants over the past few years were areas that leaned more towards leaving the coalition. When campaigning for Brexit, Boris Johnson promised that leaving the EU would open up a world of opportunities for people in the UK, one where they would get higher pay and better jobs. For many, this was a reference to how there'd be tighter checks on immigration, leading to more vacancies as opposed to new jobs being made. Did that happen? Not necessarily. While stricter immigration controls, including the points-based system, was proposed in the years since Brexit, immigration hasn't gone down significantly. More specifically, the people of the UK haven't gotten the well-paying jobs that they were promised. If immigration did create vacancies, they were in the hospitality industry, a notoriously underpaid sector. The biggest change in UK's political landscape has been the Labour Party's win in the 2024 general election, putting an end to 14 years of Conservative rule in the country. When assuming office, Keir Starmer announced the undoing of several of former PM Rishi Sunak's proposals. Yes, the notorious Rwanda bill was scrapped. To jog everyone's memory here, the Rwanda bill has been proposed long before Rishi Sunak assumed office. The controversial bill was believed by some politicians in the UK to be a necessary recourse the country had to take to curb illegal immigration by way of small boats. The Rwanda bill received criticism from several human rights organizations, who believed it was inhumane to imprison asylum seekers and then put them on flights to Rwanda, a country struggling with human rights issues itself. No flights ever took off, however, and Keir announced that the bill was scrapped altogether. As for the money that had already been pledged to Rwanda by the UK, that was long gone. Politicians in Rwanda claimed that their nation hadn't been the ones to renege on the deal. To say that Keir's decision wasn't controversial itself would also be an understatement. Some channels estimated that the new PM's lenient immigration policies would see to it that 320,000 asylum seekers entered the UK in 2024 alone. While granted, the Labour Party has a more favorable outlook on immigration, Keir reiterated his stance on immigration. Only skilled workers would be allowed entry into the country. While the UK has a more convoluted stance on immigration, France has adopted a stricter policy in its January 2024 immigration bill. Marine Le Pen, sometimes referred to as Madame Frexit in French media, the leader of the French far right, was a driving force behind the controversial bill that evoked national preference in France. Simply, the jus soli concept of children born in France to immigrant parents given automatic citizenship has been challenged. That's just one of several amendments in France's immigration system, however. Many believe that the bill serves to separate the people in France into two categories, the French and the immigrants, even the ones who have entered the country legally and have resided there for several years. The bill also proposes a system of legal challenges for immigrants who want to invite their family members to France to be with them, plus restricting almost entire access to social welfare for immigrants in the country. As an EU member, France is bound by the principle of free movement, allowing EU citizens to live and work in any member state. However, France has sought to limit this freedom on occasions. In 2010, the government controversially cracked down on Roma communities, deporting thousands of EU citizens from Romania and Bulgaria. During the 2015 European migrant crisis, France temporarily reintroduced border controls in response to the refugee influx, highlighting the tension between national sovereignty and EU principles. What impact has Brexit had on the UK economy? That's a question that Leave voters and Remain voters need to know. Each side serves to validate their decision during the 2016 referendum based on what economists are saying in the fallout of the UK's decision to leave the coalition. That, however, is only if they're saying what they want them to say. A lot of bias is involved when it comes to determining the true economic effect of Brexit on the United Kingdom. Many believe that harsh economic conditions, possible turmoil, was to be expected. Still, it doesn't take away the bigger picture, which is that the UK will see good fortunes sooner rather than later. In 2024, we're 4 years after the United Kingdom formally withdrew from the European Union. The statistics right now don't paint a grim picture, but some economists still believe that the numbers could have been better had Brexit not happened. When we talk about the UK's economy, we have to talk about trade. In the aftermath of Brexit, the biggest change in the UK's trading systems was its exit from the European single market. This was something that many Leave politicians actively campaigned for, believing that by leaving the single market, the UK could make billions more by trading with its largest new customers. They'd be members of the coalition it was once a part of. The UK sees heavy traffic at its ports, brought from various corners of the world via the English Channel. As some of the world's oldest and most frequented ports, trade with the United Kingdom has always been given paramount importance by companies seeking to enter Europe. In 2023, however, it was reported that the UK was running in a trade deficit, that is, more imports than exports. The UK's exports of goods and services totaled £867 billion, and imports totaled £898 billion. The EU accounted for 41% of UK's exports of goods and services, and 52% of imports in 2023. The UK had a trade deficit with the EU of £109 billion in 2023, and a trade surplus of £75 billion with non-EU countries. Now let's compare these numbers with 2015, before the referendum took place. In 2015, 44% of UK's goods and services were exported to the EU, while 53% of the imports came to the UK from the EU. In the same year, UK exports to the EU were valued at £223.3 billion, while UK imports from the EU stood at £291.1 billion. While the numbers seem grim, the biggest economic downturn took place between 2019 and 2020. That was when the pandemic hit the world, and all economies effectively shut down. But did that have anything to do with Brexit? Arguably not. Many Leave advocates believe that the pandemic halted economic growth that the UK would have experienced after Brexit. That being said, economists state that the UK has returned to pre-pandemic trade numbers with a single market. So, has there really been that big of a difference? France and Great Britain suffer from a multitude of problems, most of them similar in nature. Ultimately, the question is, who's worse off? In a nutshell, both countries are struggling right now. The UK's economic future in 2024 is cautiously optimistic, with modest GDP growth projected at around 1.3%, supported by resilient consumer spending and green technology investments. Inflation rates, while stabilizing, remain higher than pre-pandemic levels due to energy costs and supply chain issues, challenging real income growth despite low unemployment rates. The ongoing impact of Brexit continues to affect exports, particularly in manufacturing and automotive sectors, though new trade agreements may help mitigate some effects. Economic growth is expected to continue at a moderate pace in France. The labor market shows resilience with low unemployment rates, but wage growth is still lagging behind inflation, posing challenges for real income growth. Additionally, France's role within the EU and global trade dynamics will be pivotal, especially in navigating post-pandemic recovery and addressing geopolitical uncertainties. So, who do you think is doing better?